Hey everyone, my name is Raj Diute and I am here today to take you through setting up Nightscout on Amazon's AWS service, making use of the free tier. And to do this, we're going to use a Terraform project, which I've created and have made available for anyone to set up for themselves via this GitHub repository. So for those of you that aren't aware, Amazon's AWS service has a free tier, which is available to everyone with a new account for 12 months. And all of the bits and pieces that I've put in here to replicate what people have come or gotten used to with the old Heroku service, which is no longer free, is free for that first 12-month period under AWS. Of course, that may change. They could change what they count as free. They could add services. They could remove services. They could change limits. So please double check that before you do deploy any of this stuff, and make sure that you aren't going to get charged, because we don't want that to happen to you. And at the moment, at the time of this recording, just reiterating, it is only 12 months for free with these products and services that they have on the website listed under the free tier. There are a few ways to get around that. You could try creating a new account in 12 months' time. I can't guarantee that that's going to work, but that's a good way of once you get up to that 12-month period, seeing if you can continue those free services and offerings. But with all that said, the AWS service is an amazing set of products. It is quite complicated when you look at it for the first time. So that's why we use these projects or scripts, Terraform, which will actually go through and create and link all of those services together and make it so you literally just have to run a single command rather than going through and manually configuring everything. We do need to go through a setup to do that, and I'm going to take you through every step of that today as quickly and simply as I possibly can. If you know what you're doing, you may want to jump ahead to certain chapters. If you're new to the game, then please follow along at your own pace. And all of the things that I'm going to go through are captured on the GitHub's wiki page. You can see here, there's a full setup guide, and that's what I'm going to be going through today. So let's get started with it. And to kick things off, we need to create an account on AWS. Really, this is just putting in an email address, whatever your email is, email at, say, your Gmail account. If you are using Gmail, a really good trick with Gmail is that you can add a plus symbol on here and put anything that you like. So something like Nightscout, and I'm doing this in 2022, and that actually goes into your same email account. So it reroutes everything back into whatever your generic Gmail account is. And so, in 12 months' time, you could come along and sign up again with this, and it still all routes back into your Gmail account. Again, not saying that's going to work in 12 months' time, but it's a really good trick, actually. I use it for signing up with a bunch of services. Anyway, you can put in anything you like here. This is just what the account's going to be called when you log into it, and it's going to be up in the top right-hand corner of the screen. I've called mine Nightscout 2022, and then we'll verify the email address that's going to send you an email, which you then click on, and it will take you through the next step of the process, which is to get a few more details around your name, and it will ask for credit card details. So there's no way around this. You must put in a credit card, and that's because if you exceed any of those free tier limits, or you use a service that isn't under that free tier, it will charge you on a monthly basis. Just be aware, again, I've made every effort I possibly can to make sure that it is only using free tier services within AWS, but it will take a credit card and it will charge you if you do use something that you shouldn't be outside of that realm. Okay. All right. So once you've gone through those steps, you will have an AWS account and you'll be able to log into it, and you'll see here, this is the name of the account up the top. It's popped me into the Sydney region. Now, depending where you are around the world, you may want to choose a different region to set up your Nightscout instance in. Look, it really doesn't matter. It will default to North Virginia, which is the very first AWS instance that was ever brought online, I think. It's the main one where they try out new products and things like that. By you selecting the one that's closest to your physical location, it just means that Nightscout's going to run quicker for you because it doesn't have to travel as far across the internet to do that. So I'm going to switch back to Sydney, and as you can see, there's quite a lot here. I'm in Melbourne, and they haven't got their new data center up and running here. That's coming next year, I think, actually. So I will switch to that one when it becomes available. But you do need to take note of which one is close to you. And this funny shortened version is going to become relevant as we go through this process. So you don't need to take a note of it right this second, but you will need to know what this particular one is. For me, that's Asia Pacific Southeast number 2. And we will plug that into some settings later on. Okay, so first thing we need to do inside of your AWS account is set up a user for the Terraform project to interact with your account. And we do that by going into the services button up the top here. And the one we're looking for is IAM, Manage Access to AWS Resources. If you can't see it in the list, because there are a lot of things here, you can just type things in up here and search. So type in IAM and click on that one, and it will load up. Once that's loaded, what we're going to do is go into users, where you can see here that we're logged in as the root user, which is the main user for the account. You can use that user. If you're speaking to anyone who knows AWS best practice, they will tell you definitely not to use that root user because they have access to everything. But it is the simplest way of doing it, and it will ask you to set up MFA or multi-factor authentication. So that's sending text messages or using applications on your phone to enter a code when you log in. I would advise that you definitely do that. So if we go into users, we create a user here. And we're going to call this user Nightscout user. You can call it whatever you want. And then down here, enable an access key ID and secret access key ID. This is what we want. We want an access key or programmatic access. This allows our Terraform project to interact with the AWS portal. Permissions, we are going to attach an existing policy, and we're just going to put on administrator access, which is the first one there. Again, this is probably not the best way of doing things security-wise. You could really lock it down and just give it access to what you need it to do, but for the purposes of this process, we're going to make it as simple as possible. And then finally, create user. Great, so there we go. We have a new Nightscout user. Here is our access key, which is important. We're going to need to write that, copy that and write that down somewhere. And then we have a secret access key, which once you view it, cannot be seen again. So I suggest that you get a some sort of notepad or document text editor that you have, and you copy that down. I am going to, let's just open up Visual Studio Code, paste in our key, and then we're going to grab our secret here. Right, and I'll let everyone see that for now because it's going to definitely not exist after I record this video. But there we go. We have our key and our secret, and they are very important for what we're going to do next. But as far as setting up a user, that's all we need to do. And we go on to our next step, which is to install the AWS CLI or command line interface. And to do this, we head over to the AWS CLI installation page. There's a link in the wiki. And on it, you will see 3 sections, which will explain how to do your setup, whether you're on Linux, Mac OS, or Windows. I am on Mac OS. And these instructions are all done through, well, you can do it via a graphic interface, but the easiest way is just to click on the CLI installer. And this little guy over here, which will copy the commands that we need to run. And then if I open up Terminal, which is an application in your Applications Utilities folder, and paste those in, hit enter, and it will ask for my password of the computer, that is. and begin installing the AWS CLI. Now, I actually have this already installed, so it is going to upgrade the version that I have. And there you go. It said the upgrade is successful. And that is it. We have finished our first major step in signing up and setting up AWS. And we are ready to go on to our next one, which is to clone the Terraform AWS repo. Okay, so to clone the repo, which is this guy here, what we're going to need to do, and if you are familiar with Git, then you already know how to do this. It's very straightforward. I would suggest you skip over this one. If you're new to Git and how all of this works, then you will probably need an application to help you out. GitHub provide their own. It's called GitHub Desktop. And you'll need an account on GitHub to do this, which you probably already have because you followed the NightScout installation instructions on Heroku before. But if you don't, go to github.com and sign up for an account, and then download the GitHub Desktop application. Once you've got that going, you'll get something like this. What we're going to do is clone a repository from the internet. So if we click on that one, and then we jump over to the URL tab, you will just simply paste in the URL of the Terraform project repo, and it will tell you where it's going to save it on your computer locally. Depending on if you're on a Mac or a PC, this could be different. Obviously, I'm on a Mac, so it's putting it in my Documents GitHub folder and calling it the same thing, which is totally fine. So then we just hit clone, and that is downloading a copy of all of those files from the GitHub repo and putting them down locally. So there, I'm in my GitHub folder, and here are all those files, which you can see here. So nice and easy. There we go. And the next step, we're going to install Terraform. So Terraform is essentially an application which takes code and then it takes code and processes it and connects to a cloud service like AWS, or it could be something like Google Cloud or Heroku or Azure if you're into Microsoft's cloud, and spins up or creates all of the services and links everything it needs to according to the code that you've written. It's really, really handy. It's used by pretty much every major organization, tech organization in the world, and it's very simple to get set up and running on your computer. The Terraform instructions spell it out very easily, and depending on whether you're on a Mac, a PC, or running Linux, or you want to do it manually, there's an option there as well. I'm on a Mac. I've got Homebrew installed. If you don't have Homebrew, then you can click here and it will take you off to how to do that. 2 commands that you'll need to put into Terminal. So Terminal is an application hidden away in your utilities folder on a Mac. If you're on a PC, then Windows command prompt, the instructions are all there on Terraform. So I'm just going to follow it for the Mac ones. Hit paste in the first command, hit enter. Okay, so that's finished now. So we're going to grab the next step. I actually already have Terraform installed, so I'm not 100% sure what this is going to do, but it's going to upgrade it by the looks of it, which is good. And once this is finished, we can move along to the next step. Okay, so Terraform is finished installing now. That was nice and easy, didn't take too long at all, maybe a minute or two. So we are going to jump over to the next step, which is preparing our NightScout repo by adding an extra file to it. So you should already have a NightScout repo. If you don't, then you probably need to follow some steps on the NightScout website about how to set that up. I won't go into detail about that. There are detailed instructions on the NightScout website. If we'll just bring that up. So this tells you how to fork the NightScout project, and what that means is essentially create a copy of the NightScout code base on your own GitHub repository, and that's what this guy is here. Once you've done that, once you've followed all of those instructions, then come back to this video or to the instructions in the wiki, and you're ready for the next step. What we need to do is add a very special file that Amazon needs that explains to it how to deploy or apply the Nightscout code to the infrastructure that we're about to create. In the past, Nightscout has had versions of this file for different platforms. I think they did it for Azure or Azure, depending on how you pronounce it. But they don't do it for AWS. They may change that in the future, I don't know. But for all purposes, we need to create that file. So to do that, we click on Add File, and we want to create a new file. Also, just make sure that you're in the very base of your repo. You haven't clicked into any of these folders or anything. So Add File, Create New File. We are going to call the file appspec.yml. The YML is short for YAML. I believe it means yet another markup language, but essentially it's just a text file. And then you're going to paste in the YAML code from the wiki page. And you don't need to touch anything at all. You just paste it in. It's very, very picky about how many spaces there are between different bits and pieces. So don't touch anything, add any extra, press enter or anything like that. You just need to scroll down. You'll see it's we're going to commit the file. That means we're going to add the file into the repo. And we want to commit it directly to the master branch. Make sure that that option here is selected. And then we are going to hit Commit New File. That will then save the file, and you can see if we scroll down the new file we've just created, appspec.yml. That was the comment that we left, and it was just now created. There we go. So we're ready for our next step, which is setting up AWS on our computer. Okay, so for this one, we're going to go back to our files that we've just copied from GitHub. This is our Terraform project that we've just downloaded, and we're going to open that folder up in a text editor. I'm using Visual Studio Code. You can use whatever text editor you like, but I would recommend something like Visual Studio. If you're on a PC, there's another application called Notepad++, which is really popular. If you don't have Visual Studio Code, then you can download it. It's available for free for anyone. It's a really, really good product that lets you edit code and text files without, causing any problems. Once you've opened it up, there's going to be all of the folders and files that we've just cloned from the Terraform repo. What we are going to do is go into this config folder, and what we are looking for are these two files here. We've got AWS config.example and we've got AWS credentials.example. So these are just example placeholder files that we are going to duplicate. Okay, so to duplicate these, what we're going to do is create a new file, with AWS-credentials, and no dots or file extensions or anything like that. And we'll do that again, new file, AWS config. Okay, and then config, I'm just going to paste that in here. So this is that region that I was talking about earlier. And if we jump back to AWS and we click on this list, so that code that's in the config file is essentially the region that we are wanting to deploy our services into. So find your region that you have selected here in the list. Again, mine was Asia Pacific, Sydney. And then look at the code on the right-hand side here. That's what we need to copy and paste into that file. So for me, AP Southeast 2. So if I head back here, I've left the default as US East 1, which is that North Virginia one. That'll work for pretty much anyone in North America, Canada, that'll be fine. But if you're in Europe or Australia, it's probably something that you want to change. So for me, AP Southeast-2. And then in the credentials files, if I go to the example and select everything and then copy and paste that into our credentials file, these are the two elements that we copied out of the user management area before. So if I switch over to that file, I'm going to copy out the key here, paste it there, and then the secret, copy that one and paste it there and save that file. And there we go. We're all set. That is our AWS setup for this particular Terraform project to run. Now, if you're a more advanced user and you know what you're doing, you already have AWS, you're already deploying things into your own accounts, or you've got multiple accounts, you will probably know that there are different ways of doing this, whether it's through environment variables, whether it's through your credentials file that's in your home folder. Do what you would prefer to do. I've tried to make this as simple as possible for people that aren't normally doing these things, which is why I have a self-contained config folder with these two files in it. If you are using your own credentials in your own files, you will need to update the Terraform providers file. There's a link in the wiki as to what values and things you should be putting in here to make use of your own credentials files and system. But again, this is a much more advanced topic for those that are regularly using that service. But for everyone else, we're all good to go and we're ready to get on to building our infrastructure. Great. So now that we're ready to build our infrastructure, we're going to jump back into our terminal and we'll just clear this out here so we've got a nice, fresh new screen. We've just set up our AWS credentials in our config folder. And what we need to do is change into the folder that has our code in it. So to do that, we do cd, and again, I'm on a Mac, so this is going to be different for everyone. If you're on a Mac, this is the easiest way of doing it. cd, and then if I drag this folder in, it automatically populates everything for me. So cd means to change directory or change folder. And we're going into the GitHub folder, which has our Terraform files in it. And then I just press enter and that's it. We're in that folder now. Once we're in that folder, we need to do a little bit more setup. We need to do this thing called create. We need to create a special key that we're going to be using on our servers. And to do that, there's a command which is in the wiki. We're going to SSH key generation, and we're telling it where we want that file or those keys to go, and that's inside of our config file. So we'll just run that command. It's going to ask us if we want to set a passphrase. We want to leave it empty, so hit enter again, and that's it. You'll see that it's populated two files here. One is just key, the other has got key.pub, that's for public. You don't really need to know what those mean, but it's important. They are required for what we're about to do. Okay, clear that out again. And now once we've done that, we are ready to start working with Terraform. So to do that, we need to initialize this folder by running terraform-init. And what that is doing is setting up this folder as a Terraform project by downloading all of the things that are required to execute, and it has done that very quickly. And then we are ready to go. We are actually ready to build our infrastructure in AWS, and that is done very simply by running a Terraform apply command. There are a couple of extra things that we can do other than just run apply. We can set some variables that will affect or need to be set based on how you've set up your instance of Nightscout in the past. One of the variables that you will need to supply is what your GitHub username is. So that's, if we go up here, that's what this name is. For me, that's just my name. If you've got some sort of alias or anything, you will need to supply that into this command. The other one is what the name of the Nightscout repository is that you have forked based on the instructions on the Nightscout website. 99.9% of you, that is going to be called cgm-remote-monitor, and you will not need to enter anything into this Terraform command other than your username at the beginning. But if you have got a different version of, or have named this differently, then you will need to provide that, and there's instructions in the wiki page on what you need to do there. The other thing that you can provide into this command is your IP address, and that is not required. If you're an advanced user, you may want to do that, and what that does is allow you to connect to the server via an SSH connection, which will mean something to some people and nothing to others. Again, for 99% of the people watching this and going through these instructions, Terraform apply, press enter, and it will ask you for your GitHub username. Mine is Raj-Diyut. Enter. Okay, and then it spits out a whole bunch of code, which will mean absolutely nothing to anyone. What this is actually saying is these are all the things that I'm going to create after I execute this command. There's a whole bunch of things in there which are going to be interesting to some people if you know how AWS works and you want to know, oh, we're creating things like a VPC, we're putting an internet gateway, we're spinning up an EC2 instance, and it's going to be a T2 micro, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, important stuff. But for, again, most of you out there watching us, all you need to do is make sure it comes up and it looks similar to this, has all those plus symbols there. And when it asks us if we want to continue with this, we type in yes and hit enter. And what it's doing now is actually communicating with Amazon in the background and creating all of those things that it just told us that it wants to create. This is going to take 2 to 5 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, depending on your internet connection, depending on how long it takes for the new servers to be created on Amazon. As long as it's sort of scrolling through and saying that it's creating and things are completed, then we're all good. Just let it go. We'll come back, pick things up once it's finished. All right, so we're done. It's finished. It's created everything we need to set up Nightscout on AWS for us automatically, which is pretty cool. At the end, you'll see that it's created 28 resources, changed 0, destroyed none, and the outputs are a Nightscout URL, which is spelled incorrectly. You need to fix that up. And this is the address that we will then access our Nightscout instance at. It won't work now. If we go to this address, it will just throw up an error. There are a few more things that we need to do now that we have the infrastructure set up, but we are about 80% of the way. Good job. I suggest you copy this into a document like we have done previously with our keys, and we will come back and use that later on. But we are ready to go with our next step, which is actually configuring Nightscout in its new home on AWS. Okay, so now that we have finished building our infrastructure in AWS using Terraform, what we are going to do is configure Nightscout in that AWS service. So to do that, we are going to switch back to the AWS console where we were in here looking at users. Now we're going to look at something called parameter store, and what that is a section that holds all of the variables or configuration settings for Nightscout that are applied to our instance. If you were using Heroku previously, they were called environment configuration variables, and that's essentially what we're going to copy and paste from and to. So to get into parameter store, what we need is to go into an area called Systems Manager. I don't think you can type in parameter store here. It's sort of telling us it thinks it's in these areas. So and auto-completing it there. So we want to go into Systems Manager, or there's parameter store down here. And you'll see that there are two variables that have been set up for us. And these are just standard ones that we need to have in here that the Terraform scripts have already created for us. And you don't need to change any of these. They're just ones that are already set. What we do need to do is add in all the important ones from either our Heroku instance, or if you're doing this for the very first time, all of the required variables such as a link to your Mongo database. Now, if you haven't set up MongoDB already, there is documentation again in the NightScout official documentation, which is linked to in the wiki pages for this project. And you will need to set up a Mongo database somewhere, probably on MongoDB Atlas, which is a free service, and get your connection string or MongoDB URI, because you will need to paste that in here in order for your NightScout instance to work correctly. Now, to create a new parameter, like for instance, our MongoDB URI, we click on Create Parameter, and we are going to give it a name. Now, you'll see it's got in here the two that you saw on the previous page already, and then it gives us this sort of, prefix, which is what we need to use in order for it to be applied to the setup that we have. So every variable that you add in here, it must start with /nightscout and another / and then the variable name. So in the case of what we're going to add in now, MongoDB URI. So again, it must start with /nightscout / and then the variable name. Now, there are hundreds of these different variable names available as a part of the NightScout configuration. And there's a link in the wiki pages that goes off to that. You will need to do this process for every single configuration variable that you have or that you want to add into your particular NightScout setup. Common ones, MongoDB URI, enable the settings for what are high and low, like BG high, BG low, your alert settings. If you use something like pushover for a notification service, you could have as few as 10, you might have as many as 50. And if you're coming from Heroku, if I jump over to my Heroku one here and go into the old dyno that I had set up and go reveal config vars, you can see I had quite a lot of them. So what I need to do is, unfortunately, go through and essentially copy each of these and then paste them into a new one of these. So to do that, what we want to do is, again, start out with that name, paste in the config var, all of the settings that are here by default. So in terms of it being standard, being a type of string, being a data type of text, don't need to change any of that. All you need to do is add in your value here. And this is going to be different for all of you based on how you have MongoDB set up. So get that connection string, paste it in here. I'm just going to write connection string for now. Connection string, and then hit create parameter down the bottom. And there we go. So there's the new one that we've created. So if I do this again, start off with NightScout. Let's get the first one here, alarm high. Right, go down to our value, and it was on. Create parameter. So we just need to repeat this process for every single one of the config vars that you had in here. And once we've finished doing that, we are ready to go on to our next step. Okay, so that took a while, but you can see we have a whole bunch of extra things in here now that I've copied across. They are going to be different for all of you based on what you have used in the past, but once you've done it, they're all in here, and you can come in here and edit them, add new ones, change them, delete them. And when you do that, it will take about 5 to 10 minutes before it's applied in your NightScout instance in the future. So With that done, we are now ready to proceed on to our next step, finally, which is to link up our GitHub repository for NightScout to Amazon. And to do that, we just jump into a new area, which is called code pipeline. So if I type that in up here, you'll see code pipeline. Code pipeline is a service which will allow us to take, anytime there's a change in our GitHub repository for NightScout, it will automatically send that into this pipeline. It will bundle it up and it will put it onto our own server running NightScout, which is exactly what Heroku did behind the scenes. When there was a change in your GitHub repository, it would suck that in and deploy it out onto your Heroku instance. So we come in here, we see that it says failed at the moment. That's because we haven't authorized it to connect. And to do that, we pop open settings down the bottom here and we go into connections, and we'll see that there is a NightScout GitHub connection and it is pending. So if we open that one up, and what we need to do here is update the pending connection. So this is going to open a little pop-up window. If you have pop-ups blocked, you may need to authorize it. But once it's open, it's going to essentially get you to log in with your GitHub username and password, which we've done previously and you already have set up. And once that's available, it's going to come and load this particular page, which will ask you to select which GitHub app, which is a really weird name here, but it's essentially which GitHub account you want to connect it to. So if I click in here, it'll load all of them that are connected. There's only one for me. I click on that and I hit connect. That little window is going to disappear, and now you'll see that it says it's available. And we are ready to move on to the next step, which is kicking off the pipeline for the very first time. So now that we have our GitHub connection all ready to go, we stay inside of code pipeline service in AWS. We go back to the pipeline. So if we click on pipeline on the left and then into pipelines, and then we open the NightScout pipeline, we'll see up here it says it failed at the source, which means that it couldn't connect to GitHub in the past because that connection was pending. So it's never gone on to the next stage, which is deploy. It says here it didn't run. So to fix that, now that we've updated the connection, we hit retry. And you'll see that this changes now to be in progress. And then hopefully very quickly that will change to being complete because it succeeded. So it's got the new, it's been able to connect to GitHub successfully. It's getting all of our files from the NightScout repo that we forked, including our newly provided app spec file, which is the latest change to that. And it will deploy that to the server that has been created in the background. Now, you don't need to know all of this. I'm just sort of giving you a bit of information about what's actually happening. And the beauty of this is that now that we've sort of enabled this functionality, it will never need you to do it again. It will run all of this in the background for you automatically. Anytime that you pull down a new version of NightScout, it will just suck that down, deploy it out to the server, and you can see that it's succeeded now. So it's actually running all of the new NightScout software on the machine that's been created in the background all for us magically, which is pretty cool. Okay, so now that the pipeline has finished its deployment out onto the servers, we are done. All we need to do is jump back to the NightScout URL that we were given earlier. So if I just go back into my file here and grab the URL that we were provided when we ran the Terraform apply earlier on, and then open up a new window, paste that one in, and there we go. There's our NightScout instance, and mine secured is set to be denied by default. So I'm just going to paste in my API key, hit authenticate, and bang, there we go. There is my brand new NightScout instance running on AWS's free tier, connecting to MongoDB Atlas on its free tier, and doing everything that I need it to do, at least for the next 12 months, without any cost. To clean things up, I don't think many people are going to want to put an IP address in to access the Nightscout site moving forward. And there's a few ways that you can get around that. There's dynamic DNS services out there, and I'll put a link to a couple of those in the wiki for this repo. So you can clean it up and put in a customized address similar to what you had with Heroku if you were using that previously. Or if you know what you're doing and you run DNS for any of the domains that you may own, then you can easily point that to this IP address, and away you go with a custom domain name or subdomain of your choice. And you can also go about putting an SSL certificate on those if you would like it to run under HTTPS in the future as well. But that's it. I think that's everything you need to get up and running. And I hope it's of use to many of you out there for wanting to run a free Nightscout instance on AWS. Thanks.